PV equals T. So PV equals T, right? It's somebody's pressure theorem that happens to be very accurate and true, only it's PV equals nRT if you go look for the full equation. So there's that equation, you've got that in your mind, right? PV equals T. Pressure cooker uses that equation, or you can apply that equation. That little steam let-off valve at the top of the pressure cooker is a weight, a very specific weight to set a higher pressure inside that pressure vessel. Not very much, but enough to cook the food a lot faster, get the heat into the food. So there's a PV equals T. But the NR that's in there, N is a constant, R is a dependent variable, dependent upon the components inside the volume that you've selected. So PV equals T. You want to apply that equation to something, to a theory, to life, to how things work. One way you can do it is draw an imaginary box in the air. 1 foot square box, just floating in the air. That's your sample size. It's at atmospheric pressure. It's at atmospheric temperature. And the volume is 1 cubic foot, a box, an imaginary box. Now, when you come back to that cube in space, 6 hours later, the temperature has changed. The wind is blowing. That imaginary box in that same place, I can do these temperature pressure measurements again and see what changed. I can go further and say in that air are specific molecules that have reactions. This is where that NR comes in. It's a coefficient of expansion for materials. So because the materials expand with heat or contract, and we know about that, we have to allow for that inside the formula. So it's a dynamic equation if things are changing. And you can estimate that, you can use that, you can use that time sample. Every 3 hours I go out and I measure that imaginary box in space. So when you talk about PV equals T equations, you're required in there that V, that volume, says what you're looking at. It is also tied to a time if you put a time down there, because we know as the sun rises, things warm up, or oddly, things might cool off as the sun rises. How could that happen? You wouldn't have noticed it, but for some measurements, or maybe you would have noticed it because it was that. So that's part of the PV equals T when you're trying to apply it to something. When you apply it inside a nuclear reactor, it's a 2,000 pound per square inch pressure vessel. Your pressure cooker on the stove is very low. You can go find that. You can go do the Google on what's the pressure inside a pressure cooker and why they can be scary. You don't play with them. You know how they work. Gratuitous ad. So when people begin throwing this PV equals T thing around, the first sign of their ignorance is leaving the NR out. Because if you put water in something and you get it to its boiling point, it wants to turn into steam. Steam has higher pressure than water. So that phase change is accounted for in those extra little numbers there that you have to use in the equation if you want to understand it. Unless your snapshot, your picture, is just at one point in time. But that's not what we're worried about the next point in time. If the temperature is going up too fast, it could blow up. Your reactor could become so out of balance you can't control it anymore, like 2 accidents we know about. So PV equals T. You can apply it to your swimming pool. It's inherent in the calculations that you do in the swimming pool when you test your chlorine levels and your the minerals and pH stuff in there. So this would have been better with alcohol. Don't like this one.